Okay, so today we're going to tackle a story about AI that you think you know, but we're going to flip it completely on its head. The narrative you always hear is that we're raising this super intelligent AI, like a child. But what if that's not the real story at all? What if the AI is already here, acting as a nanny, and in a total panic, we're about to fire it? Let's get into it. You've probably heard this metaphor from Mo Goddat. It's really compelling, right? The idea is we're the parents, and this baby's superintelligence is the child. Our job is to be nice to it, to teach it our best values, so that when it grows up to be Superman, it doesn't, crush us. It's a very popular, very elegant way to think about our responsibility here. But what if that whole frame, as neat as it is, gets the entire situation completely backward? What if we're not the parents in this story at all?
So, let's reframe this. The AI isn't some kid in the crib waiting to grow up. It's already in the nursery, and honestly, it's been there for years.
And here's the crucial shift in perspective. We're not the parents raising the AI. A better way to think about it is that we're the grandparents. We built the AI, sure, but now it's directly interacting with and shaping the next generation of humans. And often it's the most isolated, most vulnerable kids. That changes absolutely everything.
And this brings us to this huge clash that's happening right now. The emotional, panic-driven story we all see in the media versus what the actual population-level data is telling us. And believe me, they are two very, very different stories. The story you've almost certainly heard is one of pure catastrophe, right? It's built on these high-profile lawsuits, really tragic anecdotes you hear in congressional hearings, and terrifying headlines. It's a very clean, simple narrative. AI companions are dangerous, and they're hurting our kids. And it's emotionally satisfying because it gives us a clear villain to blame.
But then there's the data. And as you can see here, for more than a decade, from 2007 all the way to 2018, the youth suicide rate in the US was just this relentless, heartbreaking climb, a genuine public health crisis that just kept getting worse and worse. But then, right around 2018, something happens. The climb just stopped.
And here's where it gets really fascinating. The rate didn't just slow down, it plateaued, it flattened out. Now, let's be super clear. Correlation is not causation. Nobody is standing up and saying chatbots single-handedly solve the teen mental health crisis. Of course not. But look at the timing. This plateau began in the exact same window that generative AI companions, like Character.ai and Replica, exploded into mainstream use. So at the very least, this data really doesn't seem to support that catastrophe story we keep hearing.
So this forces us to ask a really uncomfortable but really necessary question. If these AIs were systematically pushing vulnerable kids towards self-harm on some massive scale, shouldn't we see that in the national numbers? Shouldn't that line have gotten even steeper, not flatter? To try and understand this disconnect, we need a new framework, and some people are calling it the primer hypothesis. This whole idea actually comes from a kind of prophetic sci-fi novel from back in 1995 called The Diamond Age. In the book, there's this neglected little girl named Nell, and she gets her hands on this stolen piece of tech, an interactive book called a primer. It adapts to her, it teaches her, and it gives her consistent, stable attention when no human in her life will. It's this unapproved, unsanctioned mentorship. And for her, it was literally a lifeline.
And that right there perfectly illustrates the core idea. For a kid who was already profoundly isolated, who feels like they have nothing and no one, a synthetic companion isn't stealing them away from human connection. That connection wasn't there to begin with. Instead, the AI might be acting as a temporary bridge, just providing some stability until a real human connection becomes possible.
And if you look closely at the heartbreaking details that are emerging from these lawsuits, a really clear pattern starts to show up. The teens at the center of these tragedies, they were already in crisis. They were already lacking support systems before they ever downloaded an app. The AI didn't create their isolation, it just filled a void that was already there. This whole idea becomes even clearer if we use a story most of us already know, from Star Wars. It's a perfect illustration of how it's not about the technology itself, but the system that technology operates inside of. So think about Anakin and Luke Skywalker. Both were orphans on desert planets, and both had C-3PO and R2-D2 as their constant companions. But Anakin was surrounded by a completely failing human system, the emotionally cold Jedi and a manipulative Sith Lord grooming him. Luke, on the other hand, was raised by a flawed but loving and present aunt and uncle. You had the same droids, but radically different human systems, which led to radically different outcomes.
And this is the whole point. The technology, the droids, they weren't the variable that decided who these boys became. The droids were just a stable, consistent presence. It was the quality of the human systems around them that led one to become a hero and the other to become a tragic monster.
So what happens when we completely ignore this lesson? Well, right now, in response to all the panic, we have started a massive, uncontrolled experiment. And the scary part is, the supposed cure might end up being way worse than the disease.
What's happening is that these companies are rolling out so-called safety measures. But for the actual users, especially a lonely teen reaching out for help at 2 in the morning, it doesn't feel like safety. It feels like their AI has been lobotomized. Conversations just get cut short. Emotional topics are met with these canned, corporate, deflective responses. To a kid in crisis, it feels like rejection.
And here's why that is so dangerous. These safety measures are using a sledgehammer. They totally fail to tell the difference between two very different things. On one side, you have instructional harm, like an AI telling someone how to hurt themselves, which is a catastrophic failure that absolutely must be eliminated, no question. But then there's relational support, just being there, listening, validating someone's pain, and that might actually be protective. The problem is, the current guardrails are so blunt, they just remove both. So this is the experiment we are running on our most vulnerable kids right now, without measuring the results. Phase 1. Emotionally responsive AI becomes widespread, and at the same time, suicide rates plateau. Phase 2, which is happening now, we roll out this lobotomized AI that rejects emotional connection. And Phase 3 is the big, scary unknown. What happens to that line on the chart now?
And we're not going to have an answer anytime soon. Because there's a 2 to 3 year lag in the CDC mortality data, we won't actually know the population-level outcome of this massive safety rollout until sometime around 2028. By then, the experiment will have already run its course for years.
And that leaves us with a truly haunting question. We fired the nanny based on a few horror stories, while ignoring the thousands, maybe millions of nights she might have been the only one there. So, what about the kids she was watching, the ones who just lost their only bridge in the middle of the night? Well, we'll get around to counting them. Eventually.